Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of Marry the Enchantress podcast. Before starting this episode, guys, I just wanted to apologize in advance if I sound a little tired today. The weather is literally killing me. It has been several weeks now that the weather here has been absolutely unbearable. Like, it's so hot in my apartment right now, and I wanted to try recording myself in a public space with air conditioner, but unfortunately, I haven't reached that stage yet. My social anxiety is still too high for that. I also wanted to let you know that I finally created an Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube account for this podcast, which I'll try to put in my bio or in the description of this episode. So if you want to suggest topics that you liked me to talk about, share your feedbacks, or simply get new information about the podcast, you can follow me on all my social media that I will put on the description below. But anyways, today we are going to talk about a very fun subject, which is corporate jobs. Just kidding, it's not fun at all. To give you a little bit of context, 2 years ago, I started my first corporate experience, and well, I have a lot of things to say about it. Just to give you a little hint, it didn't go well at all. And this experience left me with a huge existential crisis, which actually explain why I started this podcast, because right now I genuinely don't know what I want to do with my life. Like, I used to think that all I needed in life was to graduate from university, find my job in a prestigious company, or even just a regular office job, earn a good salary, and have a stable and comfortable lifestyle. And then, reality hit me. I realized that the corporate world might not be for me, or maybe I'm wrong, who knows, but maybe this first experience I had doesn't represent the reality of corporate jobs. Maybe it was just the specific company, maybe I'm being too dramatic. But I've heard so many stories from people around me and even online about the struggles people experience in the corporate world or even in the workplace in general, whether it's shops, warehouses, hospitals. Honestly, life gets real when you reach that age where you have to work to pay your bills. So I thought it would be interesting to share my experience with you guys and talk about my thoughts and discuss about how to deal with a toxic or stressful work environment. So grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, maybe take some popcorn, and let's get started. So, to start with my first corporate experience, 2 years ago, I stepped foot for the first time into this thing called an open space office. You know, like those aesthetically pleasing corporate fish bowls filled with ergonomic chairs, motivational quotes on the walls, and people who are quietly questioning their life choices. And to be honest with you, I already went into this experience with pretty low expectations. Deep down, I think I already knew that this kind of environment wasn't really for me. And I had the choice between doing an apprenticeship, because yes, actually it was an apprenticeship and not a full-time job. So basically I had to go to university some days and go to the office on the other day. But my expectations were already very low because I had heard so many stories from people around me and even online about people having some of the worst experiences of their lives while working in corporate environments. And even though, to be fair, most of those stories came from people who were in similar situations as me, meaning people who were also doing apprenticeship. And I'm going to explain later why I didn't really enjoy it. But to give you a little spoiler, one of the main reasons was actually the fact that it was an apprenticeship. But anyways, like I said in my previous episode, I believe a lot in manifestation, the law of attraction, and the power of words. So I do believe that when you constantly think negatively, you can sometimes end up attracting more negative experiences into your life. So maybe this apprenticeship didn't go well because I already walked into that office thinking that working in an open space, sitting in front of Excel spreadsheets all day was basically my personal version of hell. But during the first few months, everything went pretty well. But honestly, it was just the beginning. And obviously, I couldn't really tell what was wrong at first. I was still in the discovery phase. However, to be honest with you, my manager gave me bad vibes from the start. Like, I couldn't really explain why exactly, but something about him just felt off to me. It was the way he spoke to people, the way he judged people. He was the type of manager who was always right in his mind, and you could never really contradict him. Overall, he was just very judgmental. Concerning the team, at first, I got along with all my colleagues. I was the newbie, and since everything was new to me, I found it really interesting because I was discovering new things every single day. And I don't really know how to explain it, but working in a big company or even just working in an office in general gives you a certain sense of pride, at least at first. That's how I felt. I felt proud of myself. I felt like I was doing something important. I was 21 years old. I had my little lunchbox, my little lanyard, my office outfits, and I really felt like I was entering the adult world, like the real adult world. And it was interesting at first. And honestly, I think I needed to experience that at least once in my life. And like I said, the fact that it didn't go well doesn't mean that I'm never going to work in a corporate job again, even though I really do hope that I won't have to. But I also think corporate environments can be a great way to meet people with incredible work experience. The people I connected with the most were actually the oldest colleagues, the ones who were close to retirement and had been working in the company for many years. And the reason why is simply because they were at a point in their careers where they didn't really have anything left to prove to anyone. They knew their worth and they were often the kindest people. I know that people sometimes have this image of colleagues in their 50s being rude to younger employees, especially younger women, because of jealousy or because they assume that we don't want to work. But honestly, I didn't experience that at all. The oldest colleagues I worked with were genuinely so nice. I'm still in contact with most of them today. However, colleagues who were in their 30s, man, that was something else. No offense to anyone in their late 20s or 30s, but I just feel like at that stage of life, people start having different priorities, I guess. From my experience, a lot of my colleagues around that age were really focused on getting promoted. And I completely understand why. Some of them were buying houses, building houses, paying back loans, starting families. Obviously, having a better position and a higher salary becomes important. And I also think that when you reach a certain point in your career, you don't necessarily want to stay in the exact same position you had when you first started working. But still, some of those colleagues became so focused on getting promoted that it created a really difficult environment, and they were constantly trying to prove themselves. And sometimes it turned into micromanaging or making things harder for the others. And honestly, those types of colleagues were also one of the reasons why I started wanting to leave. So now let's talk about why I didn't really enjoy this first corporate job experience. So one of the main reasons why I started disliking this job was because one of my colleagues, I genuinely could not get along with her because honestly, I felt like she was low-key trying to bully me. But that wasn't the only reason. One of the biggest things that made this job difficult was the complete lack of teamwork. And the funny thing is that our job literally depended on teamwork. It wasn't the kind of job where everyone could just work independently, do their own tasks, and call it a day. We had to communicate, coordinate, and rely on each other to make sure everything ran smoothly. But that's not what happened, and instead, it often felt like everyone was just looking out for themselves. People were more focused on protecting their own workload rather than helping the team succeed. So whenever there was a problem, it became a game of, that's not my responsibility, instead of, how can we fix this together? And there was very little communication, very little collaboration, and honestly, very little trust. And sometimes important information wasn't shared, and other times you had to chase people down just to get a simple answer so you could actually do your job. And it was really exhausting because when one person wasn't doing their part, it didn't just affect them, it affected everyone else, and the whole team would fall behind, deadlines would become more stressful, and frustration would just keep building. I genuinely believe that your coworkers can make or break your work experience, and you don't have to be best friends with everyone you work with, but there should be at least the sense of we're all in this together. Unfortunately, that's not the atmosphere that I personally experienced, and it felt more like everyone was just trying to survive on their own. And when you're working in a team that's supposed to function like a well-oiled machine, That kind of mindset can create a really unhealthy work environment. Also, bullying was honestly kind of normalized in that open space. I'm not going to lie, I saw two or three of my colleagues literally getting bullied in front of everyone. They were receiving harsh, inappropriate comments that were completely unprofessional, just straight up rude and unnecessary, to be honest. And I also heard that several employees before me had to quit because they were being bullied and put under a lot of pressure for no reason. And honestly, the crazy thing is that the job that I had wasn't even the type of job that required that level of pressure. Like, trust me, it was just a basic 9 to 5 corporate job. It wasn't a position where someone's life depended on you making decisions under extreme stress. And it really didn't require that kind of environment. One of the previous employees was apparently bullied so badly that they even mentioned trigger warning if you're sensitive, but they even mentioned that they didn't want it to be here anymore, if you know what I mean. Like, they didn't want it to be part of this earth, this planet anymore. So yeah, that should give you a little idea of the kind of work environment I was in. And one of my colleagues experienced burnout and never came back. Another one abandoned her position and we literally never saw her again. And honestly, I wasn't surprised because the environment was exhausting and super toxic. Another colleague decided to quit because of the way she was treated. And what's crazy is that she was one of the most skilled employees in the entire open space. They never managed to properly replace her. There was also one colleague who wasn't technically a manager, but more of an agent de maîtrise in French. I'm not completely sure what's the exact equivalent in English, but basically it's someone who is above an assistant but below a manager. And this person was also someone who made my experience really difficult. They were constantly making me feel uncomfortable. And honestly, that was one of the moments where I decided that I had enough and that I wanted to end my contract with the company. Because seriously, who the hell do you think you are? Like, first of all, I already don't like my job. I didn't like my job. It wasn't adapted to my qualifications. I barely had any tasks. And now you're trying to bully me? Not on my watch. And like I said, the tasks I was given were not adapted to my level of education. And I honestly think they misrepresented the position during the apprenticeship application because I'm pretty sure that this apprenticeship was not really designed for a master's degree student. To be completely honest, I don't even think that this type of job required a higher education degree or specific qualifications. And on top of that, I wasn't really supervised by my supervisor because since I was an apprentice, I was supposed to have someone following my progression closely. And my supervisor was supposed to be in contact with my university and my master's program coordinator to make sure everything was going well. But let me tell you, that supervision basically didn't exist. Nobody really knew what I was doing, and most of the time I had nothing to do because I barely had any tasks. And whenever I asked for new assignments, they usually didn't have anything for me, and when they did, it was often just random tasks that nobody wanted to do, like checking expiration dates or of products in the warehouse or doing other small tasks that once again had nothing to do with the degree I was actually preparing, which is crazy. Like during my job interview, they told me that I would be working closely with the manager because I was preparing a master's degree. That never happened. I never actually worked with the manager. I was mostly working with assistants and I barely had any responsibilities. So yeah, looking back, I really felt like I had been misled about what this apprenticeship was supposed to be. The other reason why I didn't like this apprenticeship was because of the working conditions, or more specifically, the routine that came with it. And honestly, I think this wasn't necessarily specific to my company, but more related to corporate jobs in general, because generally every single day felt exactly the same. For this job, I had to start very early because I was working in a department where we were in contact with suppliers, including sometimes international suppliers. So we had to be available for 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. And basically my routine was waking up at 5 a.m., go to work all day, come home around 4 6:30 or 5 p.m., cook, prepare my meal for the next day because we only had 35 minutes to eat. There was literally nothing around the company. So I had to bring my lunch every single day. Then I had to do my university assignments, work on my master's thesis because I was an apprentice, and if I was brave enough, I would try to work out. Then I would shower, go to sleep, and do the exact same thing the next day. And it was like that every freaking day. Like every day. It was always the same routine. And honestly, thank God I wasn't at the company all the time because I still had to go to university. And going to university actually helped me break this boring routine and gave me something different to look forward to. But besides that, every day felt the same. And I hated that feeling. And obviously, the fact that I was working in such a toxic environment didn't help at all. So I'm still asking myself this question: was it the job that I didn't like, or was it the corporate world as a whole? Because at the time I was still at university and most of my classmates, they were also doing apprenticeships in different companies, some bigger, some in bigger companies and some in smaller ones. So maybe my experience was just an isolated case, but honestly, out of all my classmates, only 2 of them actually had a genuinely good apprenticeship experience. So yeah, I don't think that it was only in my company. Okay, so now we can talk about the things I wish I knew before starting my first corporate job, so you know what you should do and what you should avoid doing. But first thing first, always keep your expectations low. I know that might sound a little pessimistic because life isn't always dark and gloomy, and personally, I just told you that I went into my first corporate job with low expectations because of what I had seen online and around me before. But a few years ago, I am not going to lie, working in an office was actually my dream life. Thankfully, my point of view changed a little bit before starting my apprenticeship because I can't imagine how disappointed I would have been if I had walked into an open space with unrealistic expectations. And this advice is not only about office jobs, it's also about life in general, honestly. I feel like when you keep your expectations low, or when you stay neutral about something, you're never really disappointed. So yeah, always keep your expectations low, people. The second thing I wish I knew is to not take things personally. I'm only speaking for myself here, but I come from an environment where I was always successful. I mean, at school, at university, and even during my student jobs that I had before. Every time I started something new and I failed, it was really hard for me to accept. I struggled a lot with criticism because I always wanted everything I did to be a success. But well, that's not how life works. Sometimes you're going to fail, sometimes people are going to criticize your work, and sometimes people are even going to criticize you as a person and make harsh comments that will probably ruin your mood. But something I wish I had worked on before starting my apprenticeship and entering the corporate world is learning how to not take things personally and how to just let things go. Because some people genuinely find pleasure in being rude to their colleagues and criticizing their colleagues. So yeah, I learned how to not give a damn because if you care too much about every little comment, it's going to affect your self-esteem, and then you'll start making even more mistakes at work, which is never a good thing. So obviously, I'm not talking about constructive criticism here. I'm talking about harsh, rude criticism or comments that are directed at you personally in your workplace. And if some criticism or remarks go too far, or if they become too personal or unprofessional, talk about it with your manager. And if the problem is your manager or your boss, talk about it directly with the human resources department because this is not a zoo. Like, people need to respect you. Working in an open space is already traumatizing enough. We do not need to add more trauma on top of that. The third thing I wish I knew is to never trust your colleagues too much, even the one you get along with, because the enemy is closer than you think, guys. No, seriously, one lesson that I learned the hard way is this: be careful, very careful about who you trust at work. And I know that sounds a little cynical, but hear me out. When you start a new job, especially your first corporate job, It's easy to assume that everyone has good intentions. You spend 8 hours a day with these people, you have lunch together, you joke around, you complain about work together, and after a while, it starts to feel like you're surrounded by friends. But at the end of the day, your workplace isn't your home. It's a professional environment. That doesn't mean your coworkers are bad people. In fact, some of them might become genuine friends for life. But you should take your time before trusting people with personal information or assuming that everyone wants the best for you. I learned that not everyone who smiles at you is necessarily on your side, and sometimes people are competing with you. And sometimes they'll repeat something you told them in confidence. Sometimes they'll act one way when they're with you and another way when you're not around. And that doesn't mean you should become paranoid or treat everyone like an enemy, but it simply means that you should protect your peace. Be friendly, be respectful, build good relationships, but don't feel pressure to tell everyone about your personal life, your family problems, your salary, your future plans, or the things that makes you vulnerable. And looking back, I think that one of my biggest mistakes was assuming that because I got along well with someone, I could automatically trust them. You can't. Sometimes the people who disappoint you the most are the ones you least expected. So my advice is simple. Be kind to everyone, but be selective about who you trust. And last but definitely not least, do not leave for your job. Like, please, I'm begging you. I know some of you are giving 150% of their energy every single day. You're answering emails during your lunch break. You're checking Teams messages while you're on vacation. You're thinking about work before you go to sleep. Like, girl, why are you doing this? I am not saying that you should not care about your job. Obviously, do your job well, be professional, be respectful. If you're getting paid to do something, do it properly, but don't let your job become your entire personality. Because at the end of the day, you're an employee. And I know that's hard to hear, but it's the truth. Companies are going to company. They have targets to hit, they have profits to make, they have shareholders to satisfy. That's literally what businesses are built for. I know it sounds brutal, but even if you die in your office tomorrow, they will probably find a way to replace you as soon as possible because for a company, money always comes first. If you leave tomorrow, eventually someone else would sit at your desk, someone else would do your job, the company would keep running. And that's not because you're not valuable. It's because that's how businesses work. So don't destroy yourself trying to prove your worth to a company. Don't sacrifice your mental health. Don't sacrifice your physical health. Don't sacrifice your relationships. And don't sacrifice your dream for a company that would still exist without you. One thing I realized after leaving my first corporate job is that life is so much bigger than work. And my company was not hiding the fact that they didn't care about their employees at all. Actually, let me say it one more time for the people in the back. Your job is supposed to support your life. Your life is not supposed to support your job. There is a huge difference. Spend time with your family, go to concerts, travel, start that business, write that book, start that podcast, even though I waited to be unemployed to start this podcast because, yeah. Learn a new language, go to the gym, fall in love, do whatever you want to do with your life outside of work. Because one day you're going to retire or change your job. And if work was your entire identity, who are you going to be without it? Yes, we're doing philosophy today. No, seriously, I want my job to be part of my life. I think. I'm not sure about that. But yeah, I want my job to be part of my life, but not my whole life. So yes, work hard, chase promotions if that's what you want, be ambitious, make your money, secure the bag. But when the end of your shift comes, close the laptop and go home, girl. And remember that there's a whole person waiting for you outside the office because your job might be what you do, but it's not who you are. And you need to remember that. Okay, so now that we've talked about this, we can talk about life after school, guys, or after university, because one thing that nobody really prepares you for is the existential crisis that comes after you finish school. Guys, why did nobody warn me? Seriously, you spend your entire life in school, kindergarten, primary school, middle school, high school, university, and one day, boom, you're an adult, you have a full-time job, You have bills, you have responsibilities, and you're expected to know what you're doing. Like, I'm sorry, but who approved this update? Because I definitely didn't. What shocked me the most was realizing that university and the workplace are two completely different worlds. At university, everything is stricter. You have lectures, you have assignments, you have exams. There's almost always a right answer, and you know exactly what you have to do. Like, go to your lectures, study for exams, and pass the exams, and that's it. And you know what is your goal at the end of the day? It's to get your degree. You're constantly surrounded by people your age who are going through the exact same thing as you. And then you start working, and suddenly there isn't a textbook anymore. Like, nobody tells you exactly what to do. Half of what you've learned at university is either done completely different at work, or you don't even use it. And you're just sitting here thinking, wait, I spent 5 years learning this for what? Don't get me wrong, university teaches you valuable skills, and I loved studying at university, but I've learned the biggest lessons at work. Honestly, I feel like 99% of the time, the hardest thing is not the job itself, it's the people. How to deal with difficult personalities, and also how to communicate professionally, how to manage your stress, how to advocate for yourself. Those were the things that I had to learn on the job. And another thing that made the transition really difficult is that, like I said, I absolutely loved university, and I had the best group of friends. I genuinely loved going to class. Like, I loved my teachers. I loved my routine at university. Even the stressful moments became funny because I was surrounded by people that I genuinely liked. And university almost felt like a little community, you know? And then graduation came, and suddenly everyone went their separate ways. You don't see your friends every day anymore. Your routine changes completely. Instead of walking into classrooms, you're walking into an office. And instead of planning your next night out, you're scheduling meetings. And then the weekend arrives and you're just too tired to do anything because your working environment is toxic and your colleagues are draining you. Guys, that transition hit me like a truck. Like, I genuinely do not recommend the experience. And if I could rate it 1 star out of 10, definitely would not recommend. That was such an awful transition, guys. And I think one of the hardest parts of adulthood is figuring out what you actually want to do. Like, people always ask, so what career do you want? Like, girl, I don't even know. Like, I don't know. How am I supposed to know what I want to do for the next 40 years of my life? Like, finding a job is already difficult, especially in today's economy. But finding a job you actually enjoy, that's a whole different challenge. Like, finding an industry where you genuinely feel like you belong to is even harder. Honestly, I'm so lost that I even started a podcast. So if anyone understands the confusion, it's me. But here's what gives me peace. We're all figuring it out. Nobody magically wakes up at 22 with their entire life planned out. Most adults are just making the best decisions they can with the information they have. Some people are changing careers at 30, others at 40. Some people go back to university, some quit corporate to start a business, some discover their dream job completely by accident. Like, life is not a straight line. It's okay to feel lost sometimes. So if you're listening to this while questioning your career, your degree, your future, I just want you to know that you're not behind. You're not failing. You're simply in a season of figuring things out. And trust me, we're all in the same boat, like literally. Anyways, guys, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Don't hesitate to leave a rating and follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Sorry, I've literally been waiting my whole life to say that. Like, I don't know why, but every time I heard YouTubers and podcasters say it, I was like, oh, one day that will be me. And well, here we are. So I guess manifestation is real, guys. Okay, some people dream about saving the world or becoming rich, and I dream about being a podcaster. But seriously, thank you all for being here at the beginning of this little adventure with me. And hopefully one day we'll all look back at this episode and laugh because we'll have come so far. And I love you guys so much. Stay safe, have an amazing week, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.